All right, welcome everybody. Hi, welcome. This is the June 6th Newberg City Council meeting. I call this meeting to order.
Second.
Could we have roll call, please?
I can certainly do roll call. Counselor McBride,
Here.
Counselor Wheatley,
Here.
Counselor Yarnell Holloman,
Here.
Counselor Kilberg,
Here.
Mayor Rosacker,
Here?
and Counselor Turgeson,
Here.
and Counselor Carmen.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, as I didn't say, this is the June 2nd Newberg City Council. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay, so this is the events of the previous month. First of all, in community development, there are a great many number of developments that are coming in the near future. Lots and lots of construction work, so we're going to see a big uptick very soon. And we are also going to mention that our long serving plumbing inspector Bernie retired, and we were very lucky to be able to find another plumbing inspector, Byron, to pick up the load because it's kind of a specialized skill. So very, yes. So very good, same FTE. New slide, please. Public safety celebrated our officers during National Police Week, May 11th through 17th. We appreciate the hardworking officers, and there is the icon for the National Telecommunications Appreciation Week. Wood. For the month of March, finance were very busy. They were budget committee meetings for City and Nura. Budget publications were completed, began work on supplemental budget number 3. And actually that should say May, not March. That is a typo. I shall bear that in mind, yes. And then Utility Billing and Court attended Tyler Technologies Connect conference, and training was going on for our new accounts payable invoice process. Now, I guess I should talk about this a little bit because it's kind of frightening or weird. The new AP layer in the software, you drag the invoice into the discovery layer and AI reads the invoice, can detect the company by its logo, assigns it the appropriate codes, including the dollar amount, and all you have to do is verify it. So all of those keystrokes don't happen. You just drag an invoice in and it gives you what it thinks is the right codes and all the rest of it. And then you go through it and you confirm it. So that's kind of crazy to me. New slide, please. Recent finance stats: accounts payable 1.4 million, and Pacific JCB for the skid steer grader and power rake attachment was one of those things, a couple of bits of equipment. Northwest Firefighters, the police health insurance premium came in, and Keller Associates for a whole range of different projects that they've been working on, including wastewater treatment capacity study, part 1 of the clarifier stress test, which won't finish until October when we have good rain, and the design work for the water treatment plant covers. Payroll was just about average for these months that we've been having lately. Despite a few big ticket items that we had, it didn't drive up the cost much. We had a retirement, we had a working out of class because Brittany stepped in when we were changing over from one manager to another. So we gave her the 5% for the extra work that she's been doing. And a retirement and a couple of other items happened in that period. When we have a resignation, it does cause us, of course, to pay out their vacation balance that's on the record. New slide, please. HR Happenings presented its budget to City Council and the Budget Committee, outlining the plans for the next 2 years. Attended the Wellness Academy, AFLAC renewal meeting, stats breakdown, running recruitments. You can see right there, 3 hires, 3 separations, 5 and 4 claims processed, and those are the positions that were recruited for. We have not found a city technology manager yet. That is proving to be very hard. And luckily, the police technology officer is still covering for us as our IT department head. We are really struggling to fill that position. It's really hard. Okay, library March bullet points. Library staff visited all public and private 5th grade classrooms to talk about summer reading. Started to talk about all of those programming events. Hosted a preschool project fair with 50 people in attendance. Celebrated Mother's Day. We did staff continued with monthly book clubs. And the library was, of course, voted Newberg's favourite place to read by the Newberg readers of that newspaper. So woohoo. Okay, and then, as I said, sorry, no time to proofread this one, unfortunately. And there's a couple of pictures that went with that. New slide, please. And City Recorder attended the International Institute of Municipal Clerks Conference, answered a fabulously record number of public records requests, the most we have ever had in 1 month. And Rachel, what was that final number?
I believe we were at 19 at the end of the month.
19 public records requests. Wow. If we don't call that fun and transparency, I don't know what we would call it. We also implemented a new board management system to streamline committee applications, and that lets us know when we have a vacancy, and it means we can push out messaging more effectively to all the members of our boards. New slide, please. A few community engagement events that we had this month. CE collaborated with Public Works to promote National Public Works Week. The celebration highlighted the hard-working folks that keep the city running. And these pieces of cardstock were, I am thankful for Public Works because, and this gentleman mentioned that when he flushes the handle, the stuff goes away. And he was thankful for that. So I'm thankful for that too. New slide, please. And here are just some of the Public Works maintenance things that we've done recently. Many, many miles of pipe cleaned, inspected, debris swept up, valves exercised and tested, new emergency response vehicles set up, and many city meetings set up, of course, including this one. New slide, please. And here is the crack seal project, which, as you know, has been going on for several weeks now on Mountain View. This is the first part of this summer's tough projects. I'm just going to check in with Russ to give us the very latest. How much have we got still to go on Mountain View, mate?
They're about 3/4 of the way through it. Now, they've been moving really quick. The weather is cooperating with us finally.
Thank you, sir. And so what will, not on the slides, but starting next week, we will be doing South Centre Street, another block on Meridian, and 2 blocks on 4th Street for grind and inlay. And then we'll be doing Fulton Street, which is going to be a bear. And then we're going to do slurry seal on various sections, once again in some southern districts. Going to hit Howard, going to hit some more of 3rd. So it's a lot more than we got done in the last year, and a ton of ADA work has had to happen. And the lads who are new in the sidewalk crew have been learning on the job, and they're getting better and better at it as we go along. New slide, please. And here are some of the wastewater treatment plant tasks carried out as usual. Lots of testing has to happen. Valves are always being replaced. Chain links are always breaking and need to be replaced. Communication with one of our lift stations. And the lift stations are the things that help the other stuff get up the height gradient so it can flow back to the plant. Replacing pumps and checking turbidity meters, which make sure that the water is clear enough to be discharged. New slide, please. And here are some cool repairs that we've done recently. 2-inch water meter replace on Fulton. A freeze repair service line. Now this one actually stumped me. I actually don't know what that one is. Russ, could you tell me what a freeze repair service line is?
We have the capability to freeze the water line, the water in the water line, and do a repair without shutting down main blocks of water main on an individual service when we can't, and that prevents us having to dig up the street and do all kinds of things. So what it is the apparatus we attach to it will freeze the water in the pipe. We do the repair, puts an ice plug in it, we turn it off, it thaws out, and we're back in business.
Okay, who knew that such a thing was possible? That's incredible. Thank you. New slide, please. And other things happening over at water treatment, 49 megagallons of production. You can see lots of mowing had to happen. Hydrogen sensor in the hydrochlorate building was replaced. We certainly never want a buildup of hydrogen in any of our locations. Scheduled well 3 and 4 abandonment for early June. No worries, there's plenty more water in the aquifer and the wells will be moving to other locations as the city needs them. Filter replacement and some other small repairs. New slide, please. And here are some more pictures of some more service. 3rd and Church service line repair, meter replaced, and 4th and Centre, an abandoned service which would just get disconnected. New slide, please. Engineering. Groundwater treatment plant filter covers are in the bidding phase, and we hope to have some information for you guys about that soon. And that, as you know, is in response to our Oregon Health Authority unfunded mandate. Keller submitted a draft study review with comments into the water treatment plant siting study and the wastewater treatment plant capacity study. Wastewater treatment existing secondary clarifiers will be stress tested in October to see whether or not the city will have to buy new clarifiers as part of oxidation ditch number 3. And that's when we'll really get to know what the real price tag is going to be for the oxidation ditch work. New slide, please. And that is it for this month. As you can see, as usual, our tax dollars have been put to good use, and soon we'll be smelling the smell of victory once again, which is a road that has had grinding inlay done to it. Any questions?
Thank you, Will. Once again, you make this session enjoyable. Yes, Mike.
So on the vacation, is it, can you roll it over from year to year? Can the employees do that? Or is it just if they leave within the year, you just pay them whatever is left in their account?
The vacation does continue to accrue, but there is a cap that they would eventually have to realize, but it does continue to accrue. And so often folks get their vacation paid out if they didn't use it. We have also added a buyback program a few years ago, so people can also cash out some of their vacation. Basically anything that we can do to have them not leave and go work in Hillsborough.
Any more questions for Will? All right, moving on. We have no public comments today, so I close public comments. And next is our consent calendar. Would anybody, Derek?
Yes, I'd like to move that we approve resolution 2025-3971 in the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Thank you. Passes unanimously. So we now have an administrative public hearing. And I believe, Katie, are you the presenter on this? Here she comes. Thank you. I apologize as well. I generally get here early enough to go through my packet, make sure I have everything I need. Legislative. Thank you, Al. All right. I call this administrative hearing to order. Do any of the counselors have declarations of conflicts or declarations of conflict of interest or abstentions? Seeing none to report, Katie, we are ready for our staff report. Thank you.
Okay, staff report is short. So resolution, 25-3972 is adopting the biennial budget for 25-27. This budget equals $224,810,200 with 147.28 FTE. Total appropriations equals $203,083,262 with unappropriated ending fund balances and reserve for future expenditures totaling $21,726,938. The approved property tax rate is $3.0748 per 1,000 assessed value.
Does anybody have questions for Katie? I would like to point out for the public record that the members of the council are half of the committee. We'd also have half or an equal number of members of the public who participated. Our staff did a very good job, and they answered all of our questions. And at this point, I think we're ready to proceed. So next on our agenda is public testimony. And since we have none, I will now close public testimony. So recommendation from the staff.
Adopt resolution 2025-3972.
Okay, so are there council deliberations? Councilor Kilburn?
I was gonna make a motion, but I may be premature.
Looks like you're not. Go ahead.
I move that we adopt resolution, where'd it go? 2025-3972, adopting the biennial budget for 25 through 27.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt resolution. Shouldn't have tried to wing it. Are you ready? Would you read the title, please?
So this is resolution 2025-3972, a resolution adopting the City of Newberg, Oregon budget for biennial year 25-27, making appropriations, imposing the tax, and categorizing the tax.
Thank you. And a voice vote is permitted on this, so all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then I have,
You do.
the next one is another public hearing for the state shared revenue.
For the state share revenue? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, you'll have to do your whole script again.
Okay,
Sorry.
got it. All right. So I called this public hearing to order. So the purpose of this is to consider resolution 2025-3974, state shared revenues, Our staff report, please.
Okay, for resolution 25-3974, per ORS 221.770, cities are required to pass an ordinance or resolution each year to elect to receive state shared revenues. And a copy of this resolution must be filed with the Oregon Department of Administrative Services before July 30th each year. And a public hearing must be held to determine the use of these funds. So, the exhibit that was attached with this resolution is the same one that was presented to the Budget Committee. So it's nothing that you haven't seen before. And it's just stating how we've budgeted those state shared revenues in each of the funds. Does anybody have any questions on the state shared revenues that we've proposed in the budget?
By a group, apparently not. So at this point, when I'm going to open public testimony, there's nobody that has nobody to make public testimony, so I now close that. Recommendation from the staff.
Adopt resolution 2025-3974.
Are there any questions or any comments about this? So, would somebody like to make a motion? Counselor,
I move that we adopt resolution number 2025-3974.
Second.
it has been moved and seconded to adopt resolution 2025-3974. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Motion passes unanimously.
and then I have one last resolution that is not a public hearing. And this one is Resolution 2025-3973. And this is the resolution certifying the provision of municipal services by the city of Newberg for the purpose of participating in state revenue sharing program. And for this, per ORS 221.760, cities located within a county having a population greater than 100,000, we are required to provide at least 4 essential services. And those services that we provide are the following: police protection, street construction, maintenance and lighting, sanitary sewer, storm sewers, planning, zoning, and subdivision control, and 1 or more utility services.
Oh, does anybody have questions for Katie on this? Oh.
We only have to do 4.
We just have to make part of the county disappear. So if there's no further discussion, would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we adopt resolution number 2025-3973.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you.
I would just like to say that how thankful and proud I am that we are able to pass our budget this easily. A lot of work goes into it. You guys were there for all the meetings. You know what I'm talking about. But even more than that, there are a lot of cities around us who are struggling to have their budgets heard. City of Portland, you probably heard, had a meeting that went till midnight, which is the deadline by which they had to pass it. McMinnville still hasn't passed their budget. They have lots of problems. So I think we should all give a hand to our staff for helping us. And Again, thank you. All right. Next. James is here to talk about the work session for review of the recommended development code amendments for the vacation home rental regulations.
Good evening, councilors. So tonight we're going to be taking a look at the vacation rental home policy changes coming out of the Planning Commission public hearing and recommendation. So staff's recommendation is to receive Planning Commission Resolution Number 2025-399 and conduct a work session on the proposed vacation rental home development code amendment language. So as an overview of the process that we've gone through recently, council gave staff direction to update the vacation rental home policies in March of last year and hosted a community listening session in August. In November and December, the Community Development Department held two public engagement events at the library and one virtually. We posted a notice of the potential development code amendment with the LCD in April, held a work session with the Planning Commission in April, and then a Planning Commission public hearing in May. That also as a quick reminder on the project objectives for the policy update. First, growing tourism responsibly, leveraging opportunities at the city to foster growth in tourism while minimizing conflicts between the city's residents. Second, improving compliance rates, implementing operational changes, and updating local regulations that improve compliance rates for permitting, business licensing, and transient lodging tax remittances. And third, improving knowledge of vacation rental home operations, improving the understanding of local local activities, and remaining responsive to community needs relating to them. The proposed development code amendments are in Title III, Revenue and Finance, relating to TLT collection, and Title 15, Development Code for the zoning use table, parking requirements, and special use standards. Starting with Title III, there are two definitions that are helpful as we look at the proposed changes. The first is an agent, which includes but is not limited to an online or internet-based booking service, such as Craigslist, Airbnb, or Vrbo, as a travel intermediary or a person licensed by the Oregon Real Estate Agency. And the second is operator, and that means a person who is the proprietor of a hotel or motel in any capacity, and where the operator performs their functions through a managing agent other than the employee. And those are already in the definitions for Title III. So getting into the proposed language, the first change to Title III includes that where an agent such as Airbnb is used for the advertisement, management, or booking of a vacation rental home, the agent shall collect the applicable transient lodging tax. And then where no agent is used, the operator shall continue to collect the tax. And feel free to ask any questions as we're going through the work session. There's a lot of slides we'll be going through. Next, in the operators duty section, a quick change, just adding some language that adds agent as applicable in that dichotomy of operator versus agent. And then the last change in the TLT section is in returns, where we are adding that where the agent is used for TLT remittance, the operator shall file a form confirming that the tax was remitted by the agent or that no tax was collected. And we've heard from some vacation rental home operators that they are able to see some sort of verification that Airbnb paid the tax. And so this is a system that we're looking for them to say, Airbnb paid it, here's how much they should have paid. And that'll allow us to do some kind of checking on our end from the Airbnb type agents. Any questions on Title III transient lodging tax?
So I was just curious on having an agent within 40 miles. What's the purpose of doing that? Because, I mean, I'm assuming the purpose is that you would be able to collect that tax a little bit easier, but I
So I guess
mean,
I'll distinguish the local manager that's later is
Oh,
more
okay.
of a kind of a local contact, and the agent is more like Airbnb if you're kind of advertising it online. And so those definitions just distinguish between like a homeowner operating it versus, having Airbnb or Vrbo do the actual kind of management. The local agent later is more, if there's a problem or if something happens, who do you call and have them come within a reasonable amount of time? So that's a little bit different. Anything else?
So as far as we're putting it into the code so that we have the ability to collect it. Been hearing a lot of scuttlebutt about various, agents who don't want to participate, don't want to tell you who they rent, who rents what for how long. How have we solved that problem?
So there will probably be a little bit of trial and error in that regard. One thing that we have talked about is that the TLT remittance form is a city form, so we don't kind of copy a state form or some sort of required documentation. So we've looked at, possibly just amending that form for them to say, here's who we calculated it from, and then because we own the form, if they haven't filled that out, they haven't submitted a complete form. But as that starts to come in, that probably will be an evolving collection process and kind of identifying, and hopefully kind of where we're having the operator kind of verify how much should have come in, kind of will give us another avenue to do some of that back end matching up.
So can we assume that if, let's just, for sake of argument, say Airbnb says we don't want to play this game, then we can prohibit them from operating inside the city limits?
I think I'm not sure we haven't necessarily talked about, I don't know how far that, I think we'd have to look at how far that prohibition type would go. So I don't know, do you have anything to add there? I think kind of beyond requiring them to,
Well, the state has given cities, local governments the authority to require this of the intermediaries or the platforms. And so if they fail to perform in that, then I think we have an enforcement ability to enforce that. I think what what Planner Dingwall is referring to is just how we administer that on the front end or upstream of that, and the data that we collect from these intermediaries will be really important, so that when we're auditing the process and we're looking at the bookings that appear or that we can validate through Rentalscape, which is our software subscription, we can have a reasonable estimate of what we should be receiving, the number of bookings and so forth. So I think we want to put the tools in place so that we have a high level of confidence, but like any regulatory program, there's going to be compliance and, there may be enforcement needs. That's the best I can answer on that, unless city attorney has anything to add.
all right. So moving on to Title 15 in the Development Code, the vacation rental home use is proposed to be shifted to a special use in the R1 and R2 zones, changing that from a conditional use. This would require a Type 2 special use permit reviewed by staff and issued by the director. Public notice would still be required to be posted on the site and mailed to properties within 500 feet. And then the decision could be appealed to the Planning Commission, then City Council, then to LUBA, and would be based on only the special use standards as opposed to the current R1 and R2 applications, which are special use standards, and the conditional use criteria, which are more of the subjective community fit questions. So that's the shift there. The Planning Commission recommendation also includes a change to the off-street parking space requirement for vacation rental homes. So this is a recommendation that was not in the ad hoc committee or direction from council, but Planning Commission voted to include it in their recommendation for council to consider. The current requirement is that a vacation rental home have the same number as a single-family house, which is 2 off-street 9 by 18 parking spaces. The proposed change would be to require 1 parking space for every 2 bedrooms, rounding up, with a 2-space minimum. I'm gonna go 2 slides here, and then we'll go back to a table that has some examples. So currently, for a single-family dwelling, it requires 2 spaces. And then moving on to the existing kind of commercial lodging types, for hotels and motels, there's a minimum of 1 parking space for each guest room and a maximum of 1.2 or 1.5, depending on whether or not the street has on-street parking. The current vacation rental home is at 2 spaces minimum. And then for bed and breakfast, it's a minimum of 1 off-street parking space for every 2 guest rooms, plus the standards for a single-family dwelling. So bed and breakfasts have 2, and then plus that 1 for every 2. And part of the rationale there is that the bed and breakfast require the operators to be on site in addition to any guests that are there. So can we go, I don't know if I can go back with the mouse, Rachel, can you take us back a slide? So to kind of play out kind of the comparison between vacation rental homes and bed and breakfasts. So a 1 to 4 bedroom vacation rental home would require 2 spaces as the minimum. And then as we're getting to larger vacation rental homes, a 5 and 6 bedroom would be 3 spaces, and a 7 and 8 bedroom would be 4. Vacation rental homes are limited to 2 occupants per bedroom and a maximum of 15. So there wouldn't ever be a more than an 8-bedroom vacation rental home. Bed and breakfasts would continue to scale up as the number of bedrooms increases. So the proposal from the Planning Commission is sort of a hybrid where they're taking that sliding scale of the bed and breakfast, but then not including that required 2, but then having a floor that there's never less than 2 spaces. One other note on this, kind of coming from the Planning Commission, is the recommendations that came from the ad hoc committee and then potential change and from council direction did not necessarily include any potential changes that would limit the availability of a use. So that would change the availability of somebody to have a vacation rental home on their property if the zone permitted it. This change could limit based off of, lot layout or a variety of things. So if council chose to move forward with this, staff would take a look to see whether a Measure 56 notice, kind of alerting people to changes in the permitted and limitations on uses on their property would be required, which then might adjust the timing of adoption if that needed to go out prior to a public hearing at City Council. Any questions before we move on from the Planning Commission's parking recommendation?
One thing I may add on that question of property rights is that for the uses that are currently permitted, that have a conditional use permit, they would be, and I think you're going to get into this a little bit, James, that they would be entitled, they could continue. But then if they were not allowed to continue, if they had to come into compliance with the new code, if they were not grandfathered, but had to come into compliance over a period of time with a new parking requirement, would that preclude their ability to operate if they were not able to meet that parking requirement on the site? So that, I think, is what led us to question, and we'll research this with legal staff, is if the city would need to provide that Measure 56 notice to that population of permit holders who have the conditional use. So we don't have an opinion on it. We just thought this is a question that we would want to investigate. Thank you.
So I have questions from a couple of people who came my way about parking specifically. So examples that were given, like if it's a 2 park minimum, but we're counting the garage, but then you walk by some of these Airbnbs when the garage is open and they have like a ping pong table set up and it's a whole extra room. Does that meet the spirit of the ordinance, or how would the city monitor that?
So that gets also into the kind of pathway from approval to code compliance. And so when the application would come in, we look at, driveway spots, garage spots, and kind of what the applicant is telling us where their spots are. And then if someone were to walk by and see that, that would then kind of transfer over into the code compliance. And are they providing the spots that they were approved to have? But the approval process would look at where are they telling us their spots are? And then do the spots that they're telling us they have meet the standards that we require.
Okay. The other question that I got that I have been asked several times, and I will own it, is Airbnb close to my house. The driveway looks like a two-car driveway, but the length of the driveway, the cars would both block the sidewalk, and so we've had some elderly neighbors fall. So the only way to fit in that driveway without blocking the sidewalk is actually to like parallel park in the driveway. So curious how that comes into play when it might look like a two-car.
Yeah. So when we're processing the application, we ask them to demonstrate how it's a 9 by 18 parking space. And so there have been some spaces where there may have been a variance or a code adjustment, which would be a secondary process, kind of meeting those criteria about hardship or things like that. But the process from the approval side is, those two spaces have to be 9 by 18 feet. And if not, I mean, that could be kind of one parks, off the side and then the other parks there, but we look to see that it is that dimensional standard. And then if it's not, it's either conditioned to be, paved more, or some sort of adjustment might be possible if they meet that criteria. But approved vacation rental should not, have parking spaces into the right of way or beyond the property.
And then I just want to make sure I understood this. So would we retro apply this to Airbnbs that are currently approved, or how does that?
So we will touch on kind of the broad spectrum of kind of what the grandfathering amortization schedule is. As proposed currently, if an operator was operating prior to the current standards, then they may continue operating if they can demonstrate that they've been, since pre-2013. And then if an operator has been operating since 2013 through now, we would expect them to amortize that non-conformance, just as if they came in and applied now. We wouldn't approve it if it didn't meet the code. So it would only be grandfathered in if it was pre-existing the current standards. And then with this proposed parking change, there's a possible grandfathering for the number of spaces, but not necessarily allowing them to be off the drive. They still have to meet the dimensional requirements, even if they don't meet the new number of space requirements.
Thank you.
So how many of our existing, if I remember correctly, there's 70 some that are existing now. How many of those were in place prior to 2013?
In the planning records we have, I don't believe we had any that were prior to there. And so that would be more of a, when we're publicizing the new code and the new standards, if somebody, in that coming into compliance effort. And so I think as we're looking at the Rentalscape software, we can't see beyond when we first got that software. So we couldn't go back to 2013 and say, hey, who had a vacation rental there? That date kind of being sent is more in the, if people are coming into compliance in the spirit of it, and then also, now that we will be able to see them when they're operating, if they can then come in and say, hey, I've been operating since 2012, here's my business licenses, here's my TLT payments, here's X, Y, and Z, then we would, then that provision would apply where they could continue. But it would be an owner onus to demonstrate to us that they've been a grandfather eligible property.
I mean, it'd be the owner's burden to
Yeah.
show that they had that, okay. Now, once again, once they're in place and operating, then our complaints, or I should say our enforcement will be complaint driven as always. That, if a neighbor sees the ping pong table in a supposed parking area, that they would be up to somebody to complain and then that would be investigated. Is that how that's gonna work?
Yeah, so there are no changes proposed to the current complaint process. So there is in code right now a procedure where it goes to code compliance, and then either the city manager or their designee has a hearing. And so that there is a process. And then I think once some of these policy changes are implemented, that might be increased or more more active.
I was just saying that, I met with Robert Soppy and he was concerned about that property. He was also concerned about changing the short-term rentals from, conditional to special use. Because of that, I think he is concerned about that, so. He'd like to have public comment, and if it goes to special, then there's no public, there's not a very transparent way for the public to come, other than a council meeting, which is unnerving for a lot of people, so.
Is there anybody here that didn't meet with Robert to discuss this?
I might add that Mr. Sape did, and others testified at the before the planning commission, so his comments and others are on the record there and will be part of the record that you see.
Okay. I might have lost my control, Rachel. So you might be on the spot. Oh.
While we're waiting, I think that the parking requirements proposed by the planning commission are very reasonable. I think it's a very,
I'm curious how many short-term rentals are that large that would require a change? I don't think there's that many.
Yeah, so we do have a memo that we put together for the planning commission that I can we can send around. There was one 6-bedroom and then maybe 5 to 10 5-bedrooms, but the vast majority are 3 to 4 bedrooms. So they would not see a change. It would be more kind of as we had seen a slight increase in higher numbers. So I think of the spectrum, the 5-bedrooms were being approved over the last 3 or 4 years, as opposed to since 2016, say. But the majority, I think 60% maybe or so, were 3 and 4 bedrooms. So wouldn't trigger that increase.
Do you know what precipitated the planning commission to propose the extra spaces? Were there complaints? Were there?
Yeah, so I think parking has been one of the higher proportion share of comments at planning commission meetings. So as they were deliberating at the public hearing, they did discuss kind of that the density-based approach versus the total cap. And so I think as they were considering what development standards might address livability concerns without having the density base, so that was kind of one of the things that they thought might address one of the more frequent comments that they were hearing. from the public. But so let's see if I can, all right. I think we're there. All right, so the next change is in the special use standards, so moving to 15,445. And this adds the 2% cap on the number of vacation rental homes in the city. It requires that the number of vacation rental homes permitted shall not exceed 2% of the total number of households existing in the city based on data published annually by the Community Development Department. The director shall annually publish the total number of vacation rental homes permitted and the number of available licenses. Should the cap be reached, no new vacation rental homes shall be issued until an equal number become inactive or are terminated. Subsection B there includes that a permit is considered inactive if a business license for the vacation rental home is not renewed within 1 year of its expiration. This is to give a window for permit holders who may have a period of time where they just aren't renting to renew their business license if they would like to start renting again, and they don't have to immediately renew it unless they are continuing to operate, in which case they would need it to be operating. And I will also note that the proposed language as drafted applies this provision to newly issued conditional use permits or special use permits. Previously issued conditional use permits or special use would continue to run with the land or applicant as drafted and kind of based on the direction that we had received so far. If council decides to consider limiting how long that is the case, so for example, if you were to say that previously approved vacation rental conditional use permits run with the land for 7 years, and then after that they change to being applicant driven, that would also potentially trigger that measure 56 notice. So that's just another change where we would kind of go back to that.
Thank you. I think, James, you've done an excellent job framing that. I think the crux of it is really on that smaller subgroup of rentals that would require more than 2 spaces. So I think the 5 and 6 bedroom, right, that would require additional parking from what was required under the current code.
Well, this comment is more, so currently conditional use permits run with the property, and so their approval has it running with the property. The proposed language would have a permit become inactive if it doesn't have a business license renewed within a year. And so as written, that would only apply to new permits.
Oh, okay.
And so council could choose to say, okay, no, we want that to apply to all permits. And then within 5 years, a conditional use permit then changes to running with the applicant, giving somebody kind of a runway of being able to sell it like they thought they could. But doing that would, in a way, limit someone's ability to use the land as they see fit, which could trigger the measure 56 notice.
Right. Or if they were unable to apply again and meet the standards because they don't have enough room on their lot to meet the new parking requirements. I think so. The way it's constructed currently, it affords the greatest flexibility for people to continue to operate.
Right now, if you have a permit, it's still valid regardless of the new changes as written.
What is the measure 56 you're talking about?
So that's a requirement that if the city makes a change that limits somebody's ability to use their land, so say that we change the zoning code to where R1 can't have a vacation rental, then that, limits a property owner's ability to use their land as they see fit, and so they kind of are entitled to notice of that, and then they could come to the public hearing and testify. And then if we didn't do that, there's some compensation measures, but I might also tag team with Scott on that beyond that. So it's more just giving people notice that they might lose some rights if a change happened, and giving them a chance to come and comment and go on the public record before that happens.
Yeah, and I think the remedy on that is that the city would then have to waive the regulation that was imposed that diminished their ability to use the property. So we're not weighing in on whether these changes would trigger any of that, because I think you could argue either side of that it's not limiting land use, that you have the ability to operate a vacation rental. You just have to meet the standards, which might mean that you have to modify the development on your lot to meet the parking requirement or other standards. So just out of an abundance of caution, we're thinking that if you're going to have those existing permits amortize or sunset over a period of time, that we may want to consult legal staff and determine whether or not those property owners are entitled to notice. And I think that's where we're at on that.
Now, in either case, if a property sells, the new owner of the property is going to have to buy a current business license and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the business license renewals would be ongoing as well as TLT registration. This is really only talking about land use approvals, which currently don't need to be renewed unless it lapses for some reason.
So let's discuss that. How do you feel about what kind of timeline you would, how long do we want to grandfather under the old rules or attempt to change? Does anybody have opinions strong one way or the other on this?
Mr. Mayor?
But you have to remember that they are going through a land use process to get approval. So therefore, now they have a new, currently valid land use that is different than their neighbors. So what they're trying to tell us is that the path of least resistance is to let them keep it forever. So does our council want to ask staff to try to limit that period of time? I'm in favor, and I think the committee, when we talked about it, was in favor of limiting it as quick as we could possibly change it. So go ahead, Peggy.
Yeah, I think you answered my question. I was trying to get it narrowed down to what exactly you were referring to, and it was the permit going with the land, not the owner. Okay. Oh,
And I guess if I can clarify, so under the proposed language, going forward, all permits would be run with the owner, not the land. This is just looking at conditional use permits issued between 2013 and now. But moving forward, all the permits are run with the land. Oh, sorry, with the app.
Which is one reason that the process is now less expensive to get into, because it's not as permanent as it once was.
Okay, just to make sure I understand. So we're talking about homeowners right now that have the conditional use. If they don't pay, they don't come into compliance within a year, then we could deal with the Measure 56. Is that correct?
So when a conditional use permit was issued or is issued currently, there's a provision that that permit may be transferred or sold. And so a property owner who received that permit and went through the conditional use permit process, might have done that with the kind of mental calculation of that factoring into the value of that permit. And so the Measure 56 notice gives them an opportunity to kind of note that. And if, but say if council said, okay, you can sell it within 5 years, but then after 5 years, it runs with you. That might change how somebody values the property or values the permit. And so kind of, I think this decision is more looking at if council wants to change the of how people currently have options. Scott, do you have any clarifying thing to add there? I don't know if that helps.
can I try to, let
was
me know
gonna try.
if I'm not right, but let's talk about Coffee Cottage. Now, let's assume that it was on a piece of property that was residential, but it had already been licensed as a coffee restaurant. When it's sold, the new owners had the right to continue to run it in that non-conforming or in this case, special use, but they wanted to remodel the restaurant. So therefore, they had to go through the planning process and bring it up to current standards, but they still had the ability to do it. And that means when the person sold it to the college in that case, it had a certain value. Now, if we tell that owner that when he sells it, it can no longer be used for that, then the value is diminished. Is that close?
Could be based on how somebody valued, yes, I mean, yes.
It's a decision as to whether or not you want to force them in some period of time to shift to the new regulations or not. That's that's the decision.
Okay, so I'm still trying to figure this out. So the example that you used, Mayor, is that it would change the way it is. It goes with the property. And I kind of like it that way because I wouldn't want, for the example you used, that all of a sudden, George Fox that owns that property, they now wouldn't be able to sell it if they wanted to as a coffee place, right? Or they would just have to go back through the planning process, which then somehow, if the regulations or a code gets changed, they'll go, oh, wait a minute, you can't do this anymore. Am I on this,
I think in this case, it's looking more at the registration and planning process as opposed, like, the example of not being able to operate a coffee shop isn't this proposed change. This would only be whoever buys it has to come into the city hall and apply again, or go online and apply again. But they could, as long as it meets the development standards, they could continue operating. It just, so it's, I think, less drastic than that example, but kind of in that vein.
Yeah, and I've just added, again, I think the only substantive change to the development standards was the change that the planning commission has recommended, which adds additional parking for the largest vacation rentals. And so, but for that, I don't think we'd be having this discussion.
Yes, because as written, the other changes of a local manager, of a good neighbor notice will apply to everybody, as will the TLT Airbnb, for instance, collecting TLT. I think the only one that wouldn't would be the local manager, which would only apply if they had to apply.
Yeah, and those changes, not to belabor it, but those are more operational changes. Those are not land use standards. Like, requiring an agent or a representative and regulating how close they must be to the city is a restriction on the owner, but it's not limiting the use of the property. So anyway, again, we didn't want to get into the legal fine points, but there's some questions that we would want to ask if you supported that planning commission recommendation to add additional parking requirement.
Do keep in mind that when this is going to matter is when we reach that 2% cap. Because then the ability to have one is going to be restricted to those that are already existing until one of them leaves or the city grows. So, did you, Lee?
That's what I was gonna say, is that I do feel like there's also an additional change that we are addressing this as well, because when we hit the cap, now that the permit doesn't go with the land, it goes with the person, it opens up capacity for, so say Jerry has a vacation rental. She just sold her vacation rental to a lease. I don't get that permit. Robin's been waiting. Robin's before a lease. Robin gets Jerry's permit if she's next in line. And I do think that that's fair, and
in terms of, and then the other piece that I think we were trying to get clarification through the questioning is of the permits that are current, so 2013 to now, however many there are, do we want to have a grandfathered period where we say your permit is good until this point in time, at which you then would be back on the list to apply for a permit renewal? That's the question I have.
So that would be dependent on how council chooses to.
But that's the
to phrase
question,
it.
right?
I mean,
The question we're trying to answer.
how we had seen it elsewhere in other jurisdictions could be, for example, it runs with the land for 7 years. And so if somebody sells it after year 1, sells it after year 3, sells it after year 5, it can,
I get
it
that.
can change. And then once you hit year 7 from whenever this is effective, then all of a sudden it's based on the applicant. But there, are a variety of ways that council could choose to set, that.
So with that, I would not be comfortable with like a forever grandfathered for the current permits because there's only a certain amount left. I would say go with, 5 to 7 years from the point in time that we approve, that's when the clock starts. And then everyone that has permits right now would have that 5 to 7 year, whatever the council decides. But that's, I think, the main question.
So I guess one question to follow on that is my imaginary Airbnb, which I do not own, but that is down the street from my house. I don't even have a garage. So permit goes with my imaginary land for 5 years. At the end of 5 years, do I come and apply, or do you just say, Jerry, as of now, this is the Jerry permit, as opposed to, because I guess I wouldn't want those people to have to wait and then lose out on the opportunity if 100 other people have claimed the rest of the permits and then they've now lost their spot in line because they had the land component. Does that make sense?
Can I ask one follow-on?
The ones currently in place, yeah.
So the new ones get to have it, so the new homes get to have it in permanently until they sell.
No.
Yeah, the owners have the short-term rental permanently until they sell. We're talking about the ones 2013 on.
2013 to today.
But you're saying the 5 years expires. Does Jerry go to the back of the line to get the renewal, or does it?
I think I should get.
No, I know that's what
Yeah.
you're asking.
Yeah.
You don't have, is there a process where we hold a certain amount for anticipating renewals coming?
Yeah.
So
And I'm thinking along the same lines. When Elise buys her, does Elise get the opportunity to apply right away, or does she have to go to the back of the line?
I think we haven't had conversations, at planning commission or, necessarily, I don't know if that has preference on that, and that would be a, policy decision. It makes sense that, it's still your permit, so, you shouldn't get kicked to the back of the queue. I think the technicalities of how that's put into place is more of an, operational, once the policy's set of kind of what you want to see happen, then we would develop the procedure of how that comes into play.
I think how you view those existing permitted vacation rentals that lawfully permitted, went through the process correctly, got their conditional use permit. How you want to approach those relative to the new vacation rentals that come in under the new regulatory program. We would want to hear that. From a policy perspective, I don't know why one would be discouraged or favored over the other, other than under the new program, the neighbors are receiving an annual notice. There's this additional parking that might be required. There's the registration and the obligations to pay transient lodging tax and to have a business license are the same for everyone.
As is the good neighbor notice.
And the good neighbor notice.
Everybody has to do the good neighbor notice regardless of your grandfathering status.
Yeah, so there's really, what are the differences between those who are permitted between 2013 and now and those who would be permitted under the new program, and what the expectations or the requirements would be?
Well, my question, sorry, You're gonna, can I ask a follow? It's to Scott though.
Well, I think the difference to the current owner is operationally, there isn't one because they're still doing the new good neighbor notice and they're still operating it. The difference comes at that point of transfer, where do you get to transfer the land or transfer the owner? So, but operationally, somebody who has a vacation rental now,
And so that new owner would go through the new process, which is less burdensome. It's not a conditional use permit. It's a type 2 staff review and decision. But your point, and I understand, Counselor Paulman, is if we've reached the cap, then is that, how do we
I guess, I mean,
navigate that?
also, we can come back to the next meeting, with additional kind of options and kind of where other jurisdictions are doing. I think kind of something to consider and not commenting on the merit of whether or not it should be done. But if the cap is a consideration, council could put language in it that current property owners are exempt from the cap. And then once those have all transferred, the cap, reverts to being everybody. And so you could, subsect current property owners out of the cap until they've all transferred, and then that's just an administrative tracking on our end of who, falls in what bucket. But there are kind of a couple different, more creative ways to manage that.
I think the question that I asked applies to both. I see the difference and I think it could be managed differently. I do like the idea of excluding from the cap to work through it until we get through those applications as they expire and decide if, whatever. But I do still think the question applies that we're all asking around new applicants as well, because if the cap is reached and 7 years passes or whatever length of time we're talking about before you would need to go through again, you are not guaranteed that you're going to be approved for the short-term rental beyond your initial 7 years. If you're then going to the back of the line for all the people that just waited, right? Or am I missing something in that? You would still have to go to the back.
I think as we've discussed it, very, in the scenario where somebody has a previously existing land, conditional use permit, they cross that year threshold, they still don't have to apply for, like, that staff would just say, okay, Jerry's permit is now a Jerry permit instead of a 101 East First Street permit. When you sold that next person, would have to come into the queue as if they were, a regular person. And we haven't necessarily discussed, is there a waiting period? Can you apply? I think those are policy decisions that haven't yet been addressed until kind of the system of what the cap works is. But yes, I don't think we would say that, if somebody has a permit, it crosses, they then have to go to the back of the line. I mean.
So there's
obviously
no
depends on-
time duration on the permit starting from the moment that for the person, not the land, I get that. But for the person, Jerry has a short-term rental, which hopefully she does someday. And this is passed, the permit,
She can hold it forever.
she personally can hold it forever. So my question.
As
doesn't
long
apply.
as paying business
Right, right, right.
license,
Yep,
TLT,
yep.
meeting the other registration
Right.
requirements.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, Peggy was first.
I think perhaps that to think of it in terms of slots rather than a queue might help. So somebody who's already holding a slot, when it transitions to the person and not the land, they were still entangled with that land as a landowner or whatnot. So they're still a party to the original transaction. They presumably get to hold the slot, and if there's a cap, they're still in the cap. And only if they then sell the whole shooting match to a different person or entity, then they give up the slot. And so at that point, if there's a cap availability, they could apply in the new way. And if there's not, then they would have to wait.
As I remember in the ad hoc committee's discussions, this was a fairly important point that we didn't want to designate a house as a vacation rental for eternity. We wanted the new owner to possibly turn it back into a residence and yeah. So if anybody opposes that, then this would be a good time to let us know so that staff can be aware of that. Sounds like this is gonna have some discussion when you bring the regulation to us.
Okay, so moving on, so still in the grandfathering world. So section C, look, so beyond that discussion about the reapplying and how it goes, this language looks at the development standards and who's grandfathered into what. So October 13th, 2013 was when the current development standards for vacation rental homes became effective. So that includes 2 parking spaces, frequent trash collection, single family house. So the first bucket of permit holders are those who were operating prior to that. And if they can demonstrate that they're operating prior to that, they can continue to operate in a duplex, say, because if they were allowed to operate in a duplex before, and then the code passed, they can continue operating as a legal non-conforming use. The legal non-conforming use has some provisions as to when that goes away, and so that could be someone moves or they tear down the house and build a quadplex. We might look at whether that allows them to continue that non-conforming use. The other one that we have called out in the code is that inactive permit. So if somebody has a existing duplex and then they choose to let their business permit lapse for more than a year, that voids their non-conforming status. They have to apply, and then that property would not be eligible because it's not a single family house. The second bucket has to do with this new parking recommendation. And so that has that for vacation rental homes approved between October 13th, 2013. Sorry, that's the typo there. And now they may continue operating the same way except for parking. So because we're changing parking now, they have to be grandfathered except for that parking requirement. The third bucket is amortization. So that's people who are operating between 2013 and now. And if they haven't come in for a permit and they come in when we have this grace period, they have to come into compliance. So if they had come in 2 years ago, we would have said, hey, you're not a single family house, can't be approved. So that's kind of the amortization of those non-conforming statuses that had they come in, over the past 12 years, we would have said, hey, don't meet the standards, we can't approve. And then there's compliance. So actually, could you back one, Rachel, please? So the compliance periods, they're highlighted in yellow because they are based off of when something's adopted and becomes effective. But the recommendation from the, I think that's followed all the way from the ad hoc committee, is a 90-day window for someone to apply, and then a 1-year window for that to be approved. Planning actually has a shot clock for type 2 permits for 60 days. So it's likely that the vast majority of these permits, as long as there aren't any issues, will be approved within that 90-day window. But if for some reason somebody has to, extend that 60-day clock for, to build a parking space or to do X, Y, and Z, that's where that longer period gives them a chance to have applied when they were supposed to, but then have some time to make whatever modifications to their property they need to become approved. So First bucket is grandfathering, not having to meet standards that you didn't have to meet when you were approved. Second bucket, amortization. If you had come in and wouldn't have been approved, you can't be approved now. And the third bucket is compliance, that everybody has to apply, and then you have a certain amount of time to get all your ducks in a row. Any questions on that interplay? It's a lot, I know. The next is a pretty quick and easy one, just clarifying that the three parts of registration are a land use permit, business license, and TLT. So just making that explicit in the code of what those three pieces are. And then it also adds the penalty. So now that we have the new Rentalscape tracking platform, we can see when people are advertising, when they have properties booked, how long it was booked for, et cetera. So as staff is monitoring that, upon being notified by the city that a vacation rental home is operated without being registered, the owner would have 45 days to submit application and cease operation while that application is being reviewed. And that's in contrast to the grandfathering period where the thought thus far, pending council's decision, is that previous operators could continue to operate as long as they were going through the steps to check all the boxes. This case, after that grandfathering period's over, we see your booking, we send you a letter. If you don't comply, there's the $2,000 fine for the first time offense, $5,000 fine for the second time offense. But hopefully in that 45-day window, you'll have applied and paused operations while we're processing your permits.
I do have a question here. So let's say that you find somebody has started a short-term rental, and we have exceeded a 2% cap, then they are not going to be given the opportunity to apply until there's room in the cap. Is that correct?
That's how I would imagine that, pending other direction, I think would likely go. Yep.
I have to tell you, I was pretty shocked when the ad hoc committee came up with those fines. I thought they were much larger than I would have expected, so they're gonna be serious fines, and it'll be in a code.
Also note that these fines are for operating while being unregistered. So TLT and finance has their own penalties that are based on interest and the number of months that are past due. Business license has penalties based on that. And so those aren't being necessarily replaced by this. This is more just, if you aren't registered, and then if you aren't paying your TLT tax while you're registered, that's a fine, that's a different line of questioning that would happen. All right, moving on to the standards. So this includes the change from the planning commission of the 2-space floor. We've moved the count of 1 space per 2 bedrooms into the parking section. And then this just clarifies that in no case will there ever be less than 2. So it's kind of an interplay within 2 code sections. The calculations in the parking section with all the other calculations, and this is just the asterisk that you always have to have 2. And then no changes are proposed to the refuse collection, the maximum occupancy, or temporary shelters. This subsection is for the good neighbor notice. So operators and applicants shall provide annual good neighbor notices to properties within 500 feet, including information required by the director, including name, contact information, a local contact, and the complaint procedures outlined in code. And we're proposing that compliance shall be documented at the business license renewal, similarly to an affidavit of noticing, where they tell us, sign the affidavit that they did the noticing when that happens annually.
Just to make sure your staff is going to be able to monitor this, and I think it's a great idea that they tell their neighbors, but you're going to have a method to monitor that and make sure those go out on an annual basis, right?
I think kind of how it's been discussed thus far is similar to like the public noticing for hearings where they would submit an affidavit of noticing, saying, here's the list that we sent it to, here's the notice we sent out. And then if something comes up that somebody didn't get it, or if there's, discrepancies, then we would, look into that. But kind of the baseline monitoring would be that affidavit method at the business license renewal.
And I think the idea is to have sort of a one-stop shop, so as they're renewing their business license and documenting the noticing, that can happen simultaneously.
All right. Two more subsections, then we're through. So subsection F includes the change for the some vacation rental home approvals that run with the property to running with the applicant. It includes that the land use approval of the dwelling unit is in the names of the property owners and is not transferable, except as provided on the next slide, and that when a property sells or transfers, the land use approval shall cease. And depending on council's decision on the runway for running with the land, we may add that here or add that in the grandfathering section, depending on how that language plays out. The exceptions that were added were for survivorship or inheritance, and then also looking at LPs or different ownership mechanisms, but still being tied to the applicant / owner. So we look at different jurisdictions methods, and I think we might welcome any comments on. So then the last section is the local manager. So when an application comes in, we'd be looking for them to designate somebody within 40 miles who would be the, there's a water line, break, who comes to fix it, and then they call X, Y, and Z, or there's a loud party, who do you call, trying to have somebody apart from police department, code compliance, to be somebody in the area. So that's the last proposed change. The next steps currently,
So I have a question. So the person within 40 miles, I think that that's great. But there's not any sort of like enforcement mechanism. So my imaginary Airbnb, my friend Joe Schmo in downtown Vancouver is my appointed person who never answers his telephone and never responds to an email and never does anything. Is that person hitting the intent versus should there be something that says that 90% of the time they'll respond within 24 hours to an identified emergency, or like something that makes it actually meet the intended spirit of, I think, what it's there for.
yeah, I think.
So, but then why do we have it if we can't enforce it? I guess that would be my next question.
I think part of the conversation that came up in that discussion with the planning commission is if, were a proposal like that to come in, the code compliance complaints are looking at the development standards. And so I think we would have to take a look at what a mechanism is that would allow the city to, enforce that. Yeah, so that is, yeah, I don't have, yes.
I can imagine that in our nuisance section of our code, we could, if council desired, add something about when they're unable to contact the local manager. That could be maybe classed as some kind of nuisance or something.
Procedures for complaints and
Yeah,
revoking
yeah,
permit.
so there is the complaint procedure section. I think there's also the distinction about if you're calling somebody because they're parking over the line versus, calling somebody because of, how many people. I think, it's thinking about, do we require an operator to report every time the local manager is called, or what are the, yeah, so that's,
So the way the complaint section is drafted, the current code, if the city receives 2 or more written complaints within a 1-year period regarding a vacation rental home, and the issues have not been resolved through code enforcement process, then we initiate this hearing where the permit can be revoked. And so having a contact or a representative, I think, provides more accountability on their end. It doesn't provide a metric like what I think you're suggesting, but this is really open to any complaint that's not resolved. And so if we needed to specify a time frame in which they do respond, we can add that.
So Robin's Airbnb has a massive party and I call her representative and there's no response. Do I then submit a written complaint?
You would
Like,
have.
I guess, how does
yeah.
that get triggered?
Yeah, no, that's great. And so the goal, I think, is to have, if there's a problem, there's the notice, the good neighbor noticing, and so neighbors are aware of who to contact, because there may be private disputes or concerns that are not a nuisance, that are not a city code enforcement issue. But for example, if, the trash isn't being taken out, it's overflowing, or there's a parking concern, clearly those are, parking enforcement and nuisance type complaints that would properly be addressed to the city. And so if that representative within 40 miles is not responsive and you've called and you've tried, well, certainly call code enforcement. We record that. That is one of the 2 potential complaints, and away we go.
One item that was pointed out to me by the person who we all talked to, he showed me a short-term rental that was licensed, I assume. Their garbage cans were still sitting out on the street and the garbage had been picked up 3 or 4 days prior to that. So I would like to see some, basic requirements like that we could enforce. Maybe a fairly minor penalty if they leave garbage cans out, if they don't clean up the mess that the partying people leave. Is that doable? I mean, obviously, if they're having a noisy party, I think most people are going to call the non-emergency number and let the police deal with it. But if they leave a bunch of garbage and then the owner doesn't clean it up, which would be not in his best interest because he wants to have a nice place that people pay top dollar for. But, nuisance items like the garbage cans not getting put away, how do we handle those?
so currently, I think, when things do go to code compliance, there's the priority on kind of working, addressing it without going through the 2 complaint hearing process. I don't think since I've been here, I've seen anyone get to the hearing process stage. I think that's an example where that is more on the, development standards where we have shall provide regular refuse collection. So that probably, lines up better with that kind of accountability metrics from the city. So I mean, can definitely consider those options, but I think kind of currently, the priority is on, resolving things interpersonally and kind of on that approach.
And if it's a chronic problem, the code has teeth in it that code compliance can then respond to. I believe.
And I think, if, say, for instance, it's somebody who has a grandfathered in run with the land, if that complaint mechanism, is enforced, and that's an avenue for them to lose that. And then so I think, kind of there could be some interplay with that mechanism and then some of the incentives that people have to keep their permit or.
I don't think I'm necessarily looking for an answer right now, but it's something I'd like you to, make a note of and come back to us with a solution. Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Yep. All right, well then just the quick note. So the current schedule, is to have the public hearing at the July 7th city council meeting, pending any other, thoughts or requests to work on the draft language. And with that, any other questions after all of discussion.
Was there any discussion about like minimum distances between the vacation rentals, how you would space those out? Because what I see in the future is they're all concentrated downtown or on, like a whole block might just be short-term vacation rentals because like in my neighborhood, we have an HOA that doesn't allow these things. The Greens doesn't allow these things. And I'm sure when you get other developments that come up with HOAs, they're not going to allow them. So your 2% cap is going to get smaller.
Yeah, so that has definitely been a discussion point, I think, at the, planning commission level, ad hoc committee level, public engagement events. I mean, I think that kind of density versus cap was a kind of a robust conversation that different parties had. I think the recommendation out of the ad hoc committee after their deliberation was in preference of the straight cap versus the density. And then kind of going through some of the engagement feedback and then direction from council in, I think it was March. I think we, that was the direction that we took. And then I think kind of thinking about that parking conversation as the planning commission considered that, I mean, there was public comment at their public hearing for the recommendation, kind of encouraging them to consider a density or distance-based caps. And so I think the parking was one way that they tried to kind of marry that with the direction that staff has received from council. So that's definitely a vibrant point of discussion. And yeah.
We were thinking the cap and by changing the permit to go with the homeowner. So if they sell, that'll kind of move the houses a little bit so that would eliminate the density part. That was an idea that, well, Will had that, isn't that you came up with? So if it goes with the owner and they move, we were thinking that, some of these homes they will switch out where they're super dense. Eventually, the homes will kind of disperse into the neighborhood, so we wouldn't need a density cap. That was the thinking behind it.
Is that that seems like an assumption rather than, I don't know. If my whole block was filled with short-term vacation rentals, I'd probably be frustrated. And this is if people move. And I don't know if these businesses are doing quite well. Why would anyone want to move or sell it? I don't know.
Well, and I guess to kind of piggyback, because actually I didn't even think about the HOAs, because that leaves a pretty significant, so like the Greens, I'm gonna guess the neighborhood behind Fred Meyer, I'm gonna guess Kalina Crossing is a new 200 houses that are going in that will probably have an HOA. So if we're doing 2% of total housing, like those neighborhoods will never be able to participate versus to be 2% of available housing.
I also frankly did not think about the HOA factor. When I assumed that there would be some shuffling of the deck, I was imagining an open deck and not that half the deck might get put aside. So I never thought about that.
But is it enough to?
I think the other piece of what Derek brings up too, that I'm not saying it would change my opinion necessarily, but just of concern is, the most wealthy households are in the HOA zones within the city limits. And that really does mean that the cap is on affordable housing. I mean, that is where the short-term rentals will be placed, are the places outside of an HOA that are the most affordable to flip, which is the south side of town, which I think is where a lot, and just over on the other side of 99 on the north side, but the downtown district, obviously, and by George Fox. And so I do think it straps working families for available first-time home ownership as well as just something to consider as we're talking about the cap percentage.
Just, I know one of the things that part of our discussion was can you imagine some of those, as you stated, poor neighborhoods with houses that are not necessarily upkept? If they make them vacation rentals, they're gonna have to invest a good deal of money because people are not going to want to come in and rent a house that is not well kept up. I could give you, well, over the last year, a half a dozen houses in this town that are rented to people by the month whose neighbors would love to have them out there and somebody that would take care of that property. But I think the HOA is certainly, something that we should consider how to deal with that. I don't think it's gonna be very long before our state government takes away the right to have a homeowners association set of rules that are, you know, that just seems to be the direction we're going with land use, is that those are gonna be outlawed soon, in my opinion. Peggy, you were next.
Just recalling from our ad hoc committee days, one of the debates about the density versus just an overall cap was property owner rights. So the right of an owner to buy a property for the purpose of using it as a vacation rental.
So in my neighborhood, it's an older neighborhood, and, you know, when I take my walks through that neighborhood, we've got a couple of houses that have been fixed up, and they're short-term rentals, and quite frankly, I wouldn't mind having 5 or 6 more, you know, in my neighborhood, because it increases everybody's property values, makes it easier to sell if the neighborhood is looking, you know, kept up, and so I'm not too concerned at this point. Maybe it'll be down the road at some point, and a council at that point can tackle that, because there's always issues that are gonna be coming up. You can't make a decision and fix everything all at once, but I'm okay with the density at where it's at this point.
I say it's not gonna change how I vote, and I think just a counterpiece, like, I live on a block that has 2, soon to be 3 Airbnbs and a college rental. And it does really, like, I love getting to know my neighbors when I go out walking, like, I want to stop and talk to people, and I sit on my porch every evening and try and convince folks to talk to me. Um, so like, there is a piece for me of like really wanting to know my neighbors and have a community and connection. And I miss that with people coming and going and parking on the sidewalk and so I think there's a balance. It's like, how do you keep the character of the neighborhood and the character of your community while also supporting property rights and making sure that there's a good balance.
What a lively discussion. That's why things are easy when it comes to making legislation in the city, isn't it? So, I think it's time we move on. Thank you. Thanks, James. And this brings us to new business, Library 2025 Customer Service Survey results.
Good evening. All right. There we go. I have a very quick report on our customer service survey. So you feel free to ask me questions at any time through this. Got some pictures of cute kids, because who doesn't want to see cute kids? Oh, sorry, got ahead of myself. Sorry, can you go back one? So we've done the customer service survey for several years now. I think this is our 3rd year. So we've tried to do it in April before the summer reading program, and then in August we do a program survey. So we've got 2 surveys a year. Overall, all of our ratings were great. They were between excellent and good for most things. This is the overall experience with customer service. We had 266 responses, which I thought was a great turnout. I was very pleased with that.
We did ask people to put in their email addresses this time because we learned a lesson with getting spammed last time. So only needed to have that happen once. So we separated out our customer service survey into our different service desks at all to identify if we had any areas where we needed to do some extra work. And then we also did ask, we recognize that not all people go to the children's desk, of course. So we gave them the option of not applicable as well. So for the people who are at the children's desk, we've got excellent and some good. And we did have a needs improvement too. So we took a look at that. And also, taking a look at the comments that people made as well to see if there's areas that we need to work on. Adult and senior library programs, not applicable for some people, but it is for quite a few people. So I also want to say that the colors are a little weird on this because what looks to me like fair, the 13.9% is actually good, which you can see in your packets that you were sent there. So makes us look like we're not doing as well as we're doing. Sorry about that. Yeah, same thing again. The 35.3% in this is actually the good instead of the fair in there as well. Is it showing good on yours? Okay. Maybe it's just my tired eyes tonight too. Overall experience with library's collection of physical books, audiobooks, and movies. We realized last time we did the survey, we needed to separate out our digital collection from our physical collection because people were much happier with overall with our physical collection and our e-collection, which I think is next. There we go. Is a little bit more split. And the reason for that is it's an expensive collection to maintain and it is growing every year as well. So with the budget that just passed, we'll have a little bit more money in that account to be able to fund some more money toward those high holds items. It's also the ebooks and the online audiobooks are also funded through both the state library and CCRLS as well. So there's 3 different tiers where we basically just buy down the holds, the high holds. The CCRLS will have a little bit more money to spend on that next year as well. So all of those things do impact the holds list for people. Overall customer service experience at the circulation desk. Again, this one was showing as excellent. And the children's information desk, not applicable, and then excellent for the other piece of that as well. As well as upstairs information desk. A little bit of not applicable, but not really too many on that one. The library's self-check app, this was probably the most split area. Some people didn't know about it, which is still something that we continue to work on. If you come into the library, you can actually, to check out your books, you can actually just scan the barcode with your phone, which is pretty amazing to me. And by the time you get to the door, it will have talk to the system to tell it not to beep as you're going out the door. So that is something our Mr. Worthy set up before he left. The thing that people would like to change on that is adding more than one barcode to the app because you have a lot of families where they place holds with different library cards. And so it would be nice for them to scan through for the different cards. So hopefully that will be an update coming in the future. We also do have self-check, of course. And anybody who wants to check out at the desk with library staff is also always welcome to do that. I did put in a question about the library's new website. Majority of people were not aware of it, it looks like, but not by a whole lot. So I imagine with the summer reading program start, that's most of when our website use for the library happens. So So more people will be using it soon. And then I do have a quick comparative state library report as well. So before I get to that, are there any questions for the customer service survey?
Corey, quick question. For buying down holds, is there a differentiation currently within the system for local holds? In other words, can our money be applied with efficacy to reduce local holds that doesn't go into the whole pool of the whole
Yes.
system?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we're buying down holds, what we're doing for our library is specifically buying down the Newberg Public Library holds. So our patrons, the way we have our system set up is the same way that it is with physical books, which is when Newberg Public Library has an item, it first goes to Newberg Public Library patrons. And if there's if there are no Newberg Library patrons in line for that, then it can go out to other people. And that's a way that we can share our resources, but also it makes sure that we're taking care of our people first. Thank you. All right, Newberg Library Comparative State Report, 2023, 2024. These are the most recent numbers we have right now. Let's see, State Library Report is due in October 2025, which means the new stuff will be coming out in February of 2026. Just so you know. I know it looks kind of old at this point, but those are the most recent numbers. So I wanted to list comparative libraries. So I have some library systems, like Tillamook County Library is a library system. And then I have a lot, just, libraries like McMinnville Public Library as well. Our city population, while it's around 29,000, as you know, the state library also wraps in Dundee and the rural areas as our service area, which is why it looks like our population is a little higher than you might be expecting. This is our total full-time employee staff per 1,000 population served. You can see that there are some places who are doing a little worse than we are, some people who are doing a little better than we are. And to be honest, some of this is also going to be changing in the next year too, because some of our close by cities are not doing so well financially, as you know. Our physical and digital item circulation. So I have McMinnville's numbers down here for a comparative for you. I also wanted to pull out the library to go materials. That's our online ebooks and e-audiobooks as well. So you can see how high our circulation is for this as well. So that second little number down, or the second little line down here, is our ebooks and e-audiobooks, and the top one is the physical books. Program attendance, we do great with program attendance. I will warn you right now, though, that will be changing for in the next reporting, because, as you know, we haven't had a library meeting room since February. So while we still have our base programs like story times every week and our book clubs, it does really impact the things that we can and can't do. Like Lego Club, there's no way I can have that someplace other than the library meeting room. We would have Legos everywhere. So there's some things like that, and some things that are very loud too, that, story time is in the children's area, and that's loud down there, which is great because we have two separate levels. But there's other programs that we can't necessarily do in the library. So July 1st, we should start seeing some movement on the repairs for that, which is exciting. And library visits. So I did want to point out that there's actuals and then there's estimates. So not everyone has a door counter, which I happen to think is very important. And that was another Mr. Worthy thing, which I really appreciate him putting in place. So while these are our numbers, I am working with actuals and not an estimate. And given our checkouts, I still feel good about those numbers as well.
I also don't trust
No, I don't either. There you go. And then this is collection expenditure per capita. As you can see, we're, doing better than some and not as well as others, but our book budget did go up a little bit this year, so that will be helpful to our library patrons as well. Tillamook County, though, I'm a little envious of that one. All right, any questions for me on that? Okay, thank you very much.
I have a comment. I think that you're doing a wonderful job over there. I think that your numbers are showing that. And I'm old school. I like customer service. I really do appreciate the fact that you guys try to interact with the citizens, and I would never use the barcodes to check out a book because I want to talk to one of your friendly staff people.
You can give me 2 seconds and I'll pop up to do the next item.
Why don't you, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. We'll start again at 8 o'clock. All right, we're past 8 o'clock.
Good evening. So as you know, I'm Rachel Thomas, your city recorder, and I'm back to talk to you about your council rules tonight. So you guys received all of these about a month and a half ago to look over. I received some feedback from a couple of you, but not very much. So we're here to discuss it tonight. So you've received both the former rules and the new rules to look at. A couple of the big changes that you're gonna see is in this one, if you look at the title, it is City Council and Board Committee and Commission Guidelines. Currently, they're two separate documents that are almost identical, so in my mind, it made sense to combine the two for ease of changing them, and updating things and keeping things consistent. If you want them to continue to be two separate documents, it's very easy for me to split them apart again. But that's one of the big changes. Another big change you'll see is that we've just tried to streamline and simplify this document. In the old council rules, you would see a section on public comment here and another one here and another one here. So we tried to bring like things together so it was really easy to find answers to questions. That's one thing I did. The other thing I did was update with some of the council preferences that you guys have brought to the table. So such as getting information ahead of time, the executive summaries on items, having a table of contents, things like that. The heat is on now, I think. There we go. I just turned it up before we sat back down, so you guys won't be freezing. There we go. There's the dust in the heater vents. And the other thing that I hope you'll be most excited about is the last couple pages is we've redone the outlines for all the hearings with a clear script to follow that should make it a lot easier not to miss steps. So that is something I'm excited about. I think it is a lot easier to follow. So for tonight, my goal is just to get any other feedback, questions, comments, no complaints. I don't take those. No, I will take comments, complaints, but let me know what we need to change, what else we'd like to do with this document. This is your rules. I've taken a stab at giving you a draft to work on. So whatever you'd like to do with it, we can do with it. And then after we get all the suggestions for council, we can try and pull them together. We'll be doing review to make sure it complies with our code and our charter, and our legal team will be looking over it after you guys have given as much input as you would like to. So does anyone have any input on this document, or would you like me to go through sections?
I went through this for several hours, not this time, but when I thought I'd missed the original deadline. And I had very few changes, you know, little edits, a little typo here or there. I think it's just very well done. And I appreciate all your hard work on it. I'm sure there's more work on it than we can imagine.
Well, thank you.
Where would it be in the contents? My only concern was the confusion when we do the hearing, the read the second or waive the second reading. That gets us every time. Where in the contents can I look at
Yeah,
that?
let me pull that up and show you what it looks like now. It's just, let's see how well I can control this document from over here on my computer over there. So this will be fun. Well, I might have to scroll. Give me a moment as we scroll through because it doesn't want to do the other version. Okay, so here's what that looks like now. Here's the new outline. And we can make it look even clearer. But what we've done is we have on this side what you are doing, and on this side a very clear script to follow. So it should be very simple to just go right through the page and read through the script. It has suggested language. It has anything that will help you out. Now, of course, you don't have to read the scripts word for word, but this is to keep us from tripping because we all do, right? It's hard to remember those details. Another thing that I spoke to our legal team about is clarifying the read by title only versus waiving the second reading. One thing that we discovered is that our code and charter actually says that our standard is to read by title only, and to read the entire thing would have to be by request. So we have been waiving the full reading and going by title only when really we didn't need to do that step because our charter doesn't say it. Now, it didn't hurt us to do that step. It's a good clarity moment, but our charter says that our standard is to do by title only. So that's a nice thing. Another thing that we noticed was with the second reading, yeah, we do need to continue to waive the second reading. I think we did discover. Yeah, that was what we came up with. I'm like, this was a while back. We had this conversation. Yeah, so we do still need to waive the second reading, but you'll see here, I've got in now, here's the person making the motion will make the motion to approve this. Presiding officer will do this. And then, I also have a little guideline for you on who, what the majorities are, depending on who's present, things like that. This changes based on resolution versus ordinance versus different types of items. So we've tried to make this really clear. For ordinances that are really complex, we have it, let's see where it is. Let's see. This one, no, this is orders. Ordinances are up top. Ordinances, we even have an outline that will clearly walk you through the full action of the second reading here. Waiving the second reading, here's some different, your second action can be one of these 4 steps. So you can choose which one, choose your own adventure, move through. And then your third action is the roll call. So the goal here was to make it as clean as possible, easier to follow. If you want any changes to it, I'm happy to make them. So. Does that help, Ram? That is right at the end. So it's in the outlines for public hearing. They start on page 31. Yeah.
Okay. This is helpful to me because I've been trying to compare the 2 documents and decide which one I thought was better. So now I know we're gonna go with the new one, if that's what sounds like everybody's okay with. So can we have just a little more time to make our final suggestions? Like, how much time can you give us?
Well, it's your document and it's this year's goal. So you've got until the end of the year to complete it if they want to do it this year. If you want another month or 2, we could take the summer and then bring it to legal. Just 2 weeks? Okay. So if I'll ask for another call out for any suggestions. We can bring it back to the next meeting in 2 weeks. If you are comfortable, and we can discuss any suggestions received in that time. And then at that point, we'll send it to our legal team for review, and then it will come back to you after that for final approval. Does that sound good? I see general consensus. Well, thank you, guys.
Life is very easy when you have the best department heads of any city in Oregon.
Well, I had a little fun the other day at a meeting with the bypass committee. And first of all, I claim Newberg to be the heart of wine country, and Mayor Ford had a lot of opinion on that, and then several other people wanted to pile onto that. So that was a bit of fun. But another thing that we discussed, Councilor Wheatley and I had a conversation, and the subject of trucks on First Street came up. And so I asked a question near the end of the meeting, why couldn't we consider banning through truck traffic, commercial truck traffic from using this, and instead ask them to use the bypass? And there was a lot of interest in that discussion. So Mayor Ford and I hope that this meets with your approval, and possibly the police chief, would like to sit down this Wednesday and have a discussion to begin the discussion to doing that, and see if there's any interest or any reason why we would not want to do that. Obviously, we can't get all truck traffic out because they're still going to be able to use Highway 240, which comes into the middle of the 2 towns. But beyond that, and local deliveries, of course, would have to be able to use it. So that's kind of what we're thinking. I just want to let everybody know that, it's the kind of thing that we're discussing while we're in a meeting. If anybody has any objections, this would be a good time to voice that. All right, so I'm sorry?
Trucks, in my opinion, trucks that are braking late and coming into the intersections are some of the most dangerous things I see downtown. So that's always been a concern.
Yeah, and for me, it's, not only the noise and the dirt that comes off of a lot of the trucks, but just the safety, just people are more apprehensive about crossing our street when they've got a big semi bearing down on them. So that's kind of the reasoning that, in my mind, we did it. So, good meeting. Lots of good discussion. Thank you very much. And I guess the meeting is closed.